We'll start by working on the bodice of the dress, and I've cut out one front piece which is on the fold, two sleeves and also two back pieces. If you prefer, you can cut the back on the fold as well. I like to have a centre back seam on mine because I find I have quite a hollow in the back of my back, and it just gives me that little bit of extra shaping if I have a back seam, so that I can get a nice fit with it. If you want to just cut it on the fold, you can. Trim the seam allowance off your pattern piece and then you can cut it on the fold so the back will be the same. So I've also just stabilized my shoulders. I've got a ITY knit here. It's quite lightweight and it's really stretchy. So I've just decided, because I'm going to have sleeves on the dress, I'm just going to stabilize these shoulders. So here and here on the back bodice, I've added a little bit of the knit stay tape, and that just prevents some of the stretch there. If you don't have the knit stay tape, you can just cut yourself a small piece of tricot knit interfacing, or you can also use a clear elastic. So the first thing to do will be to join our centre back seam. So on your bodice pieces, if you have two pieces, join them right sides together and sew that centre back seam, and then we'll move on. Once your centre back seam is sewn and pressed, it's time to match that with the front. So I'm going to match the shoulders here on the bodice right sides together with the front and the back, and then just sew these in place. Now as you're sewing your seams, I've got a serger now, which is very nice, but if you don't, you can just sew the seams and then trim them close. There's a 1/2 inch seam allowance included on all of the seams, or you can use your serger, or you can overcast. So I have an overcasting foot that I used to use on my sewing machine previously, and that gives a similar effect to a serger. You can actually sew and finish the edges at the same time. So continue on this now with your shoulders, pin and stitch these two together, and then we can actually try the bodice on and see how it feels for fit. So now's the time to check that you're happy with the fit. So you can just pin or loosely baste down your side seams on the bodice and just try it on and see if you need any alterations. Once you're happy, then it will be time for us to undo this pinning or basting, because we're going to set our sleeves in next. So now it's time to pin the sleeves into the armhole. So I've folded the sleeve in half and found the top of the curve just here, which I've marked with a pin, and I'll now match that with the shoulder seam, and that can be my first pin just here. And then if I take these round and match the point on the sleeve with the point under the arm and pin there on each side. And then I just like to straighten out between these two pins like this, find somewhere in the center, put the two pieces together, another pin, and then the same again, stretch out slightly between these two, find the center, add another pin, and the same all the way. We ease the curve at the top of that sleeve into the top of our armhole, and then I'll repeat on this other side, find the center, match them up, put a pin, and so on. And then once I've got this one pinned, I can pin the other and then take them over to the sewing machine and pin and sew both of our sleeves into place. So my sleeves are sewn in and pressed, and while I was over at the ironing board I took the opportunity to add some more stay tape. So this is the bottom hem, which will be my sleeve later on, and I've added some knit stay tape here. It's going to give me a nice crisp edge later on when I turn this up, and make it much less likely that I'm going to get some kind of nasty wavy finish or skip stitches when I sew this hemline. So if you want to, add your knit stay tape here. And now we need to start work on our skirt portion of the dress. So I have one of my skirt pieces here. Obviously this smaller circle here is going to be our waist, and then the larger circle at the outside of the skirt is going to be the bottom of the hemline. So before you cut your circle skirt, you really want to check the length. If you use a tape measure, match it against your natural waist or wherever you want your dress to fall, and just measure where you want the bottom of your skirt to come. So say you want your skirt to be 20 inches when it's finished, then you'll need to add ½ an inch up at the top for your hem here, and however much you want to add at the bottom, say ½ an inch again. So if you want a 20-inch skirt, you'll need for your skirt length to be 21. So you would measure your pattern piece from your waist outwards and cut the outer circle that relates to the length of skirt that you want. So in the event that the marked pattern line in your size is different, then you can ignore the outer circle and you cut that outer circle whichever length that you want for your skirt, whether you want it short and sassy or a little bit longer and a bit more modest. So once I've got my skirt pieces cut, I've just marked here, I've made a little notch in the center so that I folded it in half, and that's the center just here, and I'm going to match that to the center of the bodice. This is the back, so it's nice and easy. I can match it to the center back seam. So obviously, as always, we're going to match things right sides together. So I match my center back to that skirt notch just here. A couple of pins. And now normally it would be difficult to match a straight line to a curve, but because we've got a knit, it's going to be much easier. And it's exactly the same as I did with the sleeves. I'll match the center and I'll match these side seams, and then I'll pin in between until the skirt is evenly distributed with the bodice of the dress. So I'll carry on pinning, and once I've pinned here, then I'll sew the skirt to the bottom of the bodice, and then I'll carry on and do the other side. So I'll sew the other piece of the skirt to the front bodice, and then we are really almost done. So here's my circle skirt sewn into the straight part of this bodice just here. Now just a word about this center seam, the waist seam. If you are using a regular sewing machine, remember to use a stitch that has plenty of stretch. Otherwise, if you use just a regular straight stitch along this waist, which is the narrowest seam, as you try and get the dress on and you stretch the fabric, but if the stitches don't stretch, then you could snap the thread and you'll end up with little places that are all starting to come undone. So do remember to use plenty of stretch in that center waist seam. So I'm now going to go on and do the other side, add my other part of the skirt, the front part of my bodice, and then we'll come back. Now it's time to work on the side seams of our dress. So I've started off by pinning at the bottom of the sleeve, also matched up this seam under the arm and added a pin here. Added more pins at the waist of the dress because we want the front and the back waist obviously to match up, and down at the bottom of the skirt. And then I'm just going to continue pinning until I've got my side seams pinned all the way from top to bottom, and then I'll take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew them. When I'll start at the bottom of the sleeve, go to under the arm, all the way down past the waist and towards the bottom of the skirt, and you'll probably get best results if you do exactly the same on each side. So if you start at the sleeve on one side, when you turn the dress over, also start sewing at the sleeve on the other side. And then once everything is pinned and sewn from sleeve down to hemline, then try your skirt on again, your dress, and see if you're happy with the fit. If necessary, take a little bit in where you need to, maybe if you want a little bit more definition at the waist, and then we just have a few bits of finishing to do. So the sides of our dress is now sewn. I've tried everything on, I'm happy with the fit. So we just need to turn our attention to the few finishing touches, and we need to turn around the neckline. So I'm working from the inside like this, and I've turned my fabric ½ an inch to the inside and used plenty of pins. So when I sew, I'm also going to sew from the inside so that I can see this raw edge here, and I can make sure that as I sew I'm just catching this raw edge. Same as we talked about earlier with a stitch that has some stretch, you'll want to do that around the neck too, just to make sure that none of those stitches are going to pop later on. So as you go along here, maybe use a small narrow zigzag stitch and just catch the edge of that fabric and allow it to stretch as you go. Now I found that the neckline is not too curved, so it holds nice and easy. You can fold this ½ inch to the inside pretty easily all the way around. The tightest bit always tends to be, for me, up at the top of the shoulders just here. here, and so I've just added a few tiny little snips. You probably can't even see them. Just a few tiny snips either side of that shoulder seam to the edge of the fabric, and it just allows it to open up and flatten out that little bit more, so that when I sew I'll be able to sew and get a nice smooth finish over these shoulder sections too. So I'm now going to sew my neckline and give that a press, and then next we'll do our sleeves. So my neckline came out well, that's all nicely finished, and it's time now to work on our sleeves. Here's one I've taken care of already. This had the knit stay tape around the edge, so I've been able to fold using the edge of this tape and get a nice neat finish, and then I've stitched around with a twin needle. Of course, this is optional. If you want to, you can just do exactly the same as you did with the neckline, just turn it to the inside. I do like the finish that you get with the tape and the twin needle. The raw edge is nicely captured in the back there, and it all looks nice and neat from the front. So now I'm going to finish my other sleeve. Either use the nice twin needle effect, or if you like, just do the same as the neckline, turn in 1/2 inch and sew close to the edge. If you do that, you'll need to sew from the inside so that you can see the raw edge of your fabric to follow. So that's the top part of my dress completed. The only thing we have to do now is to hem the dress on the bottom. So remember, with a circle skirt, it's very hard to do a wide hem on a circle skirt because you're folding a wide edge into a narrower area. So you'll need to do a narrow hem at the bottom of your skirt. There is a way around it. If you do want to have a wider hem, then you can use a hem facing. So if you've got a dress maybe in a really nice fabric and it's a little bit more dressy, and you want a wider hem, then I'll provide the link where you can do the hem facing, which will give a wider hem on the circle skirt. Otherwise, you can just turn a narrow hem. If you have a casual finished dress, then you can use the twin needle, or just use the same turn and stitch techniques that you used on the neckline. And that'll be it. Your dress is completed. I think this kind of dress looks nice with a little skinny belt around the middle, so I might wear mine like that. But it also looks nice without, or you could even make just a narrow fabric belt to match too, and that would look nice as well. So thank you very much for following along. I hope you've enjoyed sewing your dress, and I look forward to seeing some examples. Please come over to our sewing chat room and show me what you make, because that really makes my day when I see something that somebody has sewn with one of my patterns. Thank you very much for following along. Hope to see you at Sew So Easy again soon.